The fireworks have fizzled out, but more missiles are being launched. The majestic military flyovers have roared past the celebratory crowds, but bombers are still off to drop lethal payloads over there. Our nation has just turned 250 years old. Happy birthday. I started out preparing for today's service going in one direction, but as some of you who have led services here have experienced, there was a detour. I was going to look at the foundational resources of this country and talk about aspirational aspects of those things, how people have strived to build on the promise of this nation and build a more perfect union. But then I picked up a book by Professor Glaude Jr. called America, USA, How Race Shadows the Nation's Anniversaries. America, USA is a hard analysis of the duality that has divided the soul of our nation since its inception, and how this manifests itself when commemorating the milestones of the U.S. And I want to read a passage to kind of set the tone. Bear with me. America is at once a nation of laws that reflect ideally the equal standing of each individual and a white republic. Freedom animates our way of life, and it is the possession of white people to give to others and to take away. These values are irreconcilable and show that a paradox rests at the heart of the nation. When the tension between these two features of the country become unbearably felt and known, white America risks everything, including the well-being of the country, to resolve it. The Civil War is just one deadly example of an unsettling truth. Donald Trump's ascendance is another. Some white people would rather destroy the country than face the doubleness that makes it what it is. The duality, or double consciousness, or contradiction, that Professor Glaude argues about is that the United States is upheld as a beacon of hope and a white republic. This paradox has been the source of societal madness, or as Dr. Martin Luther King has referred to, as a schizophrenic personality on the issue of race. Every time the nation celebrates the founding, these conflicting identities have clashed, often with devastating consequences. Glaude brings us to this reckoning without sentimentality, just moral clarity. Throughout the book, America, USA, Glaude looks at American civil religion, the term coined by sociologist Robert Bellah, referring to the set of beliefs, symbols, and rituals that establish a particular idea of the country. As Glaude reviews our civil religion over the centuries, we see that it can be used to achieve noble or nefarious ends. There is a cyclical nature to how the nation addresses the issue of race and democracy. clash and confrontation, demands for justice and equality, often leading to a violent backlash. Glaude concludes that freedom is not held as an inalienable right for African Americans. It has always been something that can be given or taken away, depending on the mood of the nation. Beginning with the centennial in 1876, at that time, the post-Civil War Reconstruction effort was collapsing. Black citizens who gained the right to vote had been electing representatives to the U.S. Senate, House of Representatives, and state and local offices. Freedom and the franchise had finally come. But then a severe backlash ensued. African American office holders were removed by force, either being killed or run out of their towns. Federal troops that had been in the southern states to maintain order were called back or no longer deployed, leaving black citizens defenseless. Also at this time, there was a consensus among white leaders in the North and South to have a reconciliation, put differences aside, and move on. Professor Glaude refers to this as, quote, disremembering that slavery was the actual cause of the Civil War. During this period, many abolitionists who had railed against slavery began to openly express doubts about African Americans being able to function as citizens. The centennial celebration in Philadelphia in 1876 featured many grand exhibits showing the technological and engineering advances of industry. But the contributions of African Americans to this country were not featured prominently. They did not fit in with the narrative of reconciliation and progress. Glaude writes about the commemoration ceremony for the centennial celebration, where Frederick Douglass was invited to participate in the proceedings. Douglass almost didn't make it to the stage. Although he had a pass for the dais, a white police officer would not let him enter, stating that there was no way an N-word was going to be on stage for this event. A United States senator recognized Douglass and ushered him into the event. Douglass did make it to the stage, but he was not permitted to speak. The nation's greatest orator at the time stood there, muted, as the centennial addresses were made. It was symbolic of how the nation regarded Black voices in the midst of reconciliation. Glaude concludes the chapter in the centennial this way, quote, on the 100th anniversary of the country, as Reconstruction struggled with its last breaths, a consolidated idea of white America, one that could overcome or at least quiet regional differences, emerged as one of the lasting features of the second founding. An idea of white racial superiority that would obliterate any pretense of living up to the power of the Declaration that all people are created equal. It is estimated that from the centennial year of 1876 to the end of the 19th century, the era popularly known as the Gilded Age, when just a few individuals amassed tremendous amounts of wealth. 53,000 Black citizens were murdered by lynchings, mass shootings, burnings, and beatings. Freedom was given, and freedom was taken away. Now, at the time of the sesquicentennial, 1926, Jim Crow was the law of the South, and de facto segregation was entrenched in the North. Added to this mix is the steady influx of immigrants from Europe, which causes xenophobia and moral panic among white society. There is a growing sentiment that the only true Americans are Nordic, white Protestants. The Ku Klux Klan becomes a potent political force throughout the North and South. The organization was almost featured prominently at the sesquicentennial celebration in a convocation that would have actually had a Pledge of Allegiance side by side with a cross burning. But organizers thought better of it. As the sesquicentennial approached, Klan members were extremely concerned about the increasing numbers of European immigrants, especially Catholics. The Klan's crowning legislative achievement was the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act, a bill co-sponsored by Klan member Albert Johnson of Washington, who then served as chair of the House Committee on Immigration and Naturalization. After 1924, immigration to the U.S. was drastically reduced. National quotas restricted entry into the U.S. from Southern, Eastern, and Central Europe, as well as the Pacific. Glaude refers to this as the historical precedent for Trump's S-hole countries comment. Glaude shows us how the MAGA and alt-right forces that have come to power today are the heirs of the Klan at the time of the sesquicentennial. There are a number of disturbing parallels between the two movements. One is the widespread tolerance and acceptance of the extremists by the wider populace. Glaude quotes the observation by W.E.B. Du Bois about normalization of the extremists. Quote, "The danger and shame are not in the movement itself, so much as in the wide tolerance and sympathy which its methods evoke among educated and decent Americans." These people see in the Ku Klux Klan a way of doing and saying that which they themselves are ashamed to do and say. Glaude keys in on this secret, this lie that manages the fears that threaten to overwhelm everything. Similarly, this lie helps perpetuate MAGA and the alt-right. When we come to the time of the bicentennial, white flight has taken off in communities that begin attempts at integration. A race war erupts in Boston, Massachusetts, after a federal judge orders that the city's schools be desegregated. White citizens perceive themselves as the victims of reverse discrimination and resent affirmative action efforts. There is a growing backlash to the civil rights movement. In the wake of Watergate and the Vietnam War, there is great distrust of government and politicians. The bicentennial celebrations were marked by rampant commercialism and marketing. Every product seemed to be red, white, and blue. And when it came to the American story woven for the bicentennial, the role of African Americans in U.S. history was not completely ignored, as in the previous anniversaries, but was co-opted to fit into the mythology of the grandness of the American experiment. The lack of a meaningful confrontation or discussion of our history and promise of this country left us incomplete. Recognizing this void, Glaude invokes the poet Langston Hughes. Quote, "Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free." Now, as we reach the semi-quincentennial today, voting rights protections have been dismantled, and a dash to racially gerrymander congressional districts to reduce or eliminate seats elected by voters of color is in full swing. Birthright citizenship is hanging by a thread, one Supreme Court justice away from being snipped off. Mass deportation efforts are moving in fits and starts, and the federal government tinkers with martial law in various cities. Concentration camps are being built throughout the U.S., and innocent people, including U.S. citizens, are being swept up, unlawfully detained, brutalized, or even killed arbitrarily. The executive branch rules without any check or balance from the other two branches of government. Corruption, incompetence, and chaos have been normalized. According to Glaude, quote, "In the country's 250th year, we bear witness to an ugliness reborn. Trump and his supporters instinctively disentangle the American story from any history that questions its innocence. As though enforcing a storybook account of the country might relieve the pressure of the past as a source of suffering, an escape hatch from the American nightmare of history. They long for an immigration policy that embraces the idea of the country imagined by the Ku Klux Klan of the 1920s. They reassert a consensus that takes white America as its moral center of gravity, and they try to hide their hands with talk of merit and colorblind equality, draping it all in American exceptionalism and the glory of the flag. This storybook version of America USA requires, as it did in 1876 and 1926, that Black people be made to play a minor role, if any, in the history of this country. In its 250th year, and I'm quoting Glaude again, America USA is in deep trouble. And I cannot say with certainty that the country will survive. Some might ask for a blueprint for how we might respond to it all. In some ways, I have become wary of the demand for solutions, which too often works as part of a ritual that leads the country to believe that it is actually trying to be more just, to be better. I have no interest, especially now, in playing that game. It is clear, and it has been so since its founding, that we cannot be a white republic and a beacon of freedom. A choice must finally be made. If the country is to survive these troubled times, it will depend on what we do today in defense of democracy, and on whether we are honest enough and courageous enough to admit the duality at the heart of America, USA, and the source of our madness. So Glaude ends with offering that a choice must be made. And when I read that, I thought, what about the choice that was recently made? Back in 2024, just a couple of years ago, the nation had a choice between a convicted felon and someone who is found by a jury to have committed sexual abuse, and the sitting Vice President of the United States, a former United States Senator, a former Attorney General of one of the largest states in the country, and for years, a dedicated prosecutor fighting crime in a large city. And the nation chose the convicted felon. What does that say about the level of misogyny and bigotry in this country? I leave you with that question. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but let us ponder that. I don't know if we want to open it up or not, but we'll have opportunity for conversation during the coffee hour. I want to thank you for coming out today. It's summertime and a lot of people are on vacation. And I want to thank all of you who make this congregation a beloved community. Working with the Youth Council, I see that we have a place where we make it possible for young people to be who they are and grow into good people who will do good things. And that gives me hope.